What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Remake. So around 2 years ago, I made a Miz title reign video. The video is 4 minutes of me talking about his road to the title, with the next 2 talking about the run itself. If you've watched in the past, I don't see how that's a good video at all. Add to that, I recorded it on an old-ass Samsung phone. This was back when I had 12 subscribers. This one itself, I was supposed to release it next month, not now. And the video that was supposed to be uploaded today was actually Legacy, the final part. I got that video basically done, you know. If you guys want it later this week, I'm all for it. Just comment down below. But with that said, talk about a lame duck. Ever since Miz won the title, it was like, oh, he's eventually going to lose it. It didn't have to be that way, and in my personal opinion, he was one of the best things to come from 2010 WWE. While he never displayed a high level of skill in the ring, Miz made up for it with his charisma and world-class promo skills. Add to that, he was rapidly improving in the ring, and by the end of the year, he was ready. Looking back, his rise to the top was pretty damn fresh. The main event scene for nearly 3 years was always a combination of Randy Orton, John Cena, and Triple H. It's about time somebody new came in. Another thing that Miz had to his advantage was his incredible work ethic. With all these attributes, it's a no-brainer as to why they made him champion. So I set the stage. Let's get into it. On November 22nd, 2010 episode of Raw in Tampa, Florida, Randy Orton was set to defend his title against Wade Barrett. Before the match, Nexus attacked and left the Viper a wounded animal. Wade Barrett thought the match was a foregone conclusion, but the ghost of his past, John Cena, FU'd him. Orton took advantage, and oh my god, that was one of the loudest crowd reactions I've ever heard in this era of WWE. Orton wasn't celebrating or anything like that, rather regaining his breath afterwards. Then all of a sudden you hear, awesome. He realizes what's up, and the Miz comes out. Immediately right out of the gate, the Miz goes after that leg. It was his best opportunity. Add to that, Orton had gone through a grueling match. Orton's leg was being rammed into the post, being kicked at, but nonetheless, Randy still had something there. He had Miz scouted, and he was desperate to hit that skull-crushing finale, but it was really looking like the cash-in was going to be a fail. But the Miz caught Orton with the skull-crushing finale. 1, 2, 3, new champion. The kid from the real world, the guy who was bullied by the likes of JBL, Chris Benoit, the guy that was almost released, managed to stay here and stand tall as the WWE champion. He had finally captured the WWE's most coveted prize, and what about that girl's reaction? It is iconic. Looking back, I'd say it was a shocking moment. I don't think anybody expected Miz to cash in at all that night. He was claiming the previous night, he's like, oh, sooner or later I'm going to cash in or whatever, but I don't think anybody thought to themselves it was going to happen in Orlando, Florida. I just don't think anybody thought that. There's this clip of the Miz in the back celebrating. It's a little hidden gem. If you've never seen it before, I suggest you do. Except for that awkward Triple H handshake thing, you know, that was pretty weird. Well, since his good buddy captured the title, Alex Riley planned on holding an extremely over-the-top celebration party for the Miz. Michael Cole, because of this, was jumping in joy, even more so than Miz himself. Hell even claimed that the new champion will go down as the greatest. Oh, and about that celebration, yeah, he didn't want it. Why? Because he found the perfect feeling that described what the fans had felt last week, and a few images of Miz Girl popped up. Those pictures were a reminder of what people used to say about him. Oh, you'll never make it, yada yada yada. And he was shouting how some were saying he'd amount to nothing and told the likes of JBL and Triple H that I am the WWE champion. He poked insults in Orton's way, claiming he's not out due to injury, but because he's ashamed. And an even bolder statement coming from The Miz was the fact that he promised to be the longest reigning champion in history. So to put it in perspective, if that were true, Miz wouldn't lose the title until 2022, I assume? For somebody who was like everybody else, he sure didn't show it. Saying he's 1 in a billion, criticized the fans, all that. Then he went on a tirade about the old guys such as Roddy Piper. He listed a bunch of guys who failed to win the title. Suddenly Jerry Lawler stands up and mentioned how Miz won the title. He obviously downplayed it into Mike. It was the ramblings of an old man. Man who was still jealous that somebody like Miz accomplished something he failed to do for 40 years. Michael Cole told Lawler to sit down. Before he did, he asked Miz to challenge somebody who wasn't jumped, you know. He's talking about himself, of course. Shill was talking about how Miz will make an example out of him, and so the King took this chance to ask for a title match. He didn't accept, so Lawler called him a coward. The new champion took great offense to this, but it didn't matter because the anonymous GM had to get involved. Long story short, they wanted a title match, and so Miz was booked in a TLC WWE title match against the King. Nickelback plays, Lawler's joyous, Miz is looking like he saw JBL. And speaking about the match itself, I don't think anybody thought Lawler had a chance to win. Especially because Miz had only won the title. Anyways, it's a title reign video, and this is a title match, so you know what that means. Another thing I'd like to mention is how weird it was to see that King in a TLC match. It just doesn't seem right. It's like thinking of Bret Hart in a Hell in a Cell match. It just sounds weird. With that said, the Miz was slowly taking his time in beating up the King. CM Punk on commentary felt that Miz was making a huge mistake here. You know, he should be climbing up the rungs. Lawler did find that opportunity, but Alex Riley got involved. Things slowed down for a bit, but then Miz took a backdrop on the ladder, and the crowd was starting to get much louder, but then the Apprentice hit a clothesline. Nonetheless, the King bounced back, sending him through a table. Miz recovers, screws up big time once more, sort of like TNA at the time, and went through a table. Fans are once again making their voices heard. Michael Cole on commentary was stuttering over his words, and before you knew it, he desperately helped Miz make a recovery. The fans were believers. Slowly but surely, he put his hands on the belt, but then Michael Cole randomly comes in and pulls him down, leading to a clobbering right hand. Lawler had enough, but with his back turned, Miz climbed to the top. They delivered blows, but in the end, Miz blasted him with the title, and the King fell from the heavens. He retrieves the belt, and that's the match. It's not bad when you look at who was in the match, and at the time it felt huge to see a TLC match, especially for the title on Raw. This was also the true beginning of the Cole-Lawler feud, which turned out to be extremely dreadful as time went on. With the King now in his rear view, at least for the time being, The Miz had to refocus on a certain Viper, Randy Orton. He made his return on the December 6th edition of Raw. He didn't blame The Miz for cashing in, saying he would have done the same exact thing. Funny enough, he wasn't lying in his storyline. However, the big difference between himself and The Miz is the fact that he can back it up in the ring. Hell, he even claimed that the title's coming back to him tonight, but The Miz rained on his parade. First of all, he trashed Orton for being unoriginal. He's heard the same things from him coming from others. You're not good enough. You guys know that speech. Miz didn't seem all that worried over TLC. In his mind, it was a foregone conclusion that Orton was taking the L. The Viper, though, did not feel the same way. Why? Well, because Nexus wasn't going to be there to help Miz. Hell, he even said that A-Rye wasn't even worth half a man. His ego was crushed by this, and so he challenged him to a match. I don't know what the hell he was trying to say here, but he's like, Randy Orton's gonna know what it's like to be A-Rye. Also, The Miz had the opportunity to choose what the pay-per-view match stipulation was gonna be. In the ring, Orton caught Cole with the RKO. Riley, meanwhile, was getting a little too ahead of himself and was under the belief that he's actually beating Randy Orton. Miz didn't want to be embarrassed, everybody's watching his moves. And yeah, about that, Miz didn't wait until after the match to attack. Afterwards, he wanted to demonstrate what kind of match was going to go down at TLC, but it turns out it was Randy Orton who showed him a preview of the tables match. Yes, that's the match they had at the pay-per-view. They had one more confrontation on Slammy Night, but on the topic of that, it was a weird-ass night. For one, this indie wrestler named David Arquette was there, and second, Angry Miz Girl won a Slammy. The champion didn't even let her finish the speech, and the douche ended up taking the award for safekeeping. Punk then asked if he's going to sing happy birthday to her. Cheeky. After that, he began walking down to the ring, and I'm like, why is Arquette following them? Miz didn't even mention his presence at all. And the reason why I was walking down to the ring was because he had an impromptu match with Rey Mysterio that concluded with a dirty finish after Del Rio got involved. The celebration didn't last long because Cole announced that A-Rye's teaming up with Arquette to face Orton tonight. He didn't seem all that scared with the challenge, and also this has got to be the most random thing I've seen today. Despite this, he's got my respect for actually going through a table. At today, he actually donated the money he received from his WCW run to the families of Owen, Darren Drozdov, and Brian Pillman. But anyways, Orton sent Miz a message with a powerbomb, and just wanted to mention this whole thing because I doubt I ever will. Heading into the tables match, John Morrison won the right to challenge for the WWE Championship. Miz wasn't losing sleep over Orton nor Johnny. He was absolutely incensed with how people perceive him. The man was fed up, and that's the story of his title reign in under 10 words. Now, his match with Orton wasn't really that notable in my opinion. The ending, though, was cool. I'm not a big fan of tables matches due to the way they have to be structured, but anyways, let's talk about the match itself. Michael Cole, as expected, was still gloating and bragging about Miz's year. In the ring, the champion lacked any offensive game, and Orton was all over him until he made the mistake of being too slow. Nonetheless, Miz found himself in an extremely precarious situation, but he avoided it and went to work, barring a few moments. He was in total control, and also I wanted to mention that this was where Orton randomly used to execute the angle slam. It's a nice little addition to his arsenal. Even when Miz was in a dangerous situation, Riley saved his ass until the Viper knocked him down. Right when things clicked for the challenger, the ref got knocked down and he awkwardly side powerbombed Riley through the table before taking the skull-crushing finale. Miz, being the devious heel that he was, dragged Orton's body atop the broken table and retained the title. All of a sudden, the referee noticed the replay and restarted the match. Fans were loving it. Michael Cole's raging, whining about instant replay, but anyways, Randy was all fired up. The momentum clearly shifted in his favor, and Cole wasn't enjoying this. Then Miz stopped his momentum dead in his tracks by shoving Riley into Orton, who went through the table, and the crowd was deflated. Well, that's a unique ending. The match isn't a favorite of mine. Not bad, but it just fails to stand out. But nonetheless, that ending was so damn good. It fit Miz's character like a glove. First of all, he dragged Orton's body on top of the remnants of a table, and then follows up by barely winning it. Loved it. Still, though, the feud continues. The next night on Raw, the self-proclaimed Awesome One gloated and gloated and gloated about his victory. The way the man spoke, you'd think Randy Orton had zero offense in that match. Suddenly, this segment turns whack with the inclusion of Alex Riley and Michael Cole. This segment was sort of like the ghost of Christmas Past or something along the lines of that. Miz, he had zero remorse for beating Jerry Lawler. This dork comes out and calls TLC unacceptable, and Miz didn't seem to look at things that way. His perspective was far, far different compared to others, and all that mattered is who's champion after the match. Add to that, he rubbed it in. Next up, Angry Miz Girl comes in and claims John Morrison will win the title. This was the ghost of the future, I assume. So he cut a promo on being the future before John Morrison interrupted. He told Miz that he beat him in the past and the present, and he was certain that that will happen in the future. The champion didn't agree with these statements, saying he's always been better than Morrison. A-Rai strikes leading to Sheamus coming in, and they brawl. The King whacks Riley in the mouth, and before we knew it, the anonymous GM popped up. They announced a 6-man tag match. Miz has got to team up with Alex Riley and Sheamus against John Morrison, Jerry Lawler, and Randy Orton. All of a sudden, Orton came out and clotheslined that champion. And about the title picture itself, Orton wasn't exactly out of it. He told Morrison straight up that if he wins, he's coming after him. With regards to that opening segment, it was weird as hell, but I get what they're doing. It was a unique perspective, You had Miz explaining why he did what he did in the past, good or bad, and I thought it was unique. At the end of the night, Randy Orton aided the King in scoring a victory over the WWE Champion, and this was the first time in a while that The Miz took an L. Then the anonymous GM got involved, announces an Orton and Miz match for SmackDown, and all of a sudden the champions got the last laugh with a quick ambush. There's not much to say about this one, except the fact that Miz almost lost clean and almost took the punt. With Orton temporarily out of the picture, this forced The Miz to focus on John Morrison. His old friend randomly walked up to him and said that if he beats Riley, then he gets to choose the stipulation for their title match, and if Riley wins, then Morrison forfeits his title shot. As expected, Miz was loving this, and about the match itself, Morrison was informed and of course won the match. Immediately, the number one contender announced that it's Falls Count Anywhere. Miz was seething like nobody. He tore A-Rai a new one, and he didn't want to compete because according to him, he was a scientific wrestler. And basically, he's like, oh, this match is barbaric, something along the lines of that. To make matters worse, John Morrison cost him his match against the King. In light of this result, the sore loser opted to attack, and he left the King a battered man. About the Falls Count Anywhere bout, it's really memorable. For one, it was WWE's first match in 2011. Morrison had just come off a huge matchup against Sheamus and had a lot of momentum. I think up to this point, it was also the Miz's best match in WWE, and that's how good it was. Anyways, let's talk about it. Immediately, Morrison brawled with the champion. Alex Riley was the token jobber and got zero offense. The challenger hits this cool-ass spot off the WWE logo, which had never been done before, I assume. And The Miz was a bit loopy, but escaped this situation. Even then, he was reliant on his apprentice to do some work. Morrison shined like the brightest star with his athletic skill, and after the commercial, Miz was looking for a suplex on top of a guardrail. That never went down, but he managed to hit a backdrop. The champ was starting to actually accomplish stuff without Riley, who died during that spot, I assume. He was growing frustrated with Morrison's resiliency, and that proved to be his key to the comeback. He endured the pain, was kicking out, and this led to his momentum bar being filled up. At one point, he even hit the Starship Pain. Fans go insane. Josh Matthews thinks it's it, but The Miz kicked out. Best of all, though, was that Starship Pain through the table. Miz goes to the cover, but once again, John kicked out. He then wraps it up with a skull-crushing finale. Amazing. What makes this match so good is John Morrison's performance. The spots themselves are pretty memorable, especially a WWE logo thing. Miz put in a good performance as well with the heel work, and I can't recommend this one enough. It's easily my match of the video. Nothing could top it in my eyes from this title run. If we're talking him kayfabe, high risk cost Morrison the match, and it's as simple as that. Anyways, to Miz, this match proved that he's still champion. It also proved that he's versatile. He's a great technical wrestler, a rugged brawler, and best of all, he's awesome. Later that night, it was revealed that Randy Orton is the next challenger for the title at the Royal Rumble, and the King made his return the following week. Despite not being at 100%, he was booked in a tag match against The Miz, and Randy Orton somewhat cost The Miz the match, preventing him from intervening. The champ was multitasking, making enemies out of the wrong guys at the same time. Guys such as John Cena. In this segment, the Awesome One interrupted Cena and said that he's played out. The Miz didn't seem confident of Cena's chances in the Rumble, and he acted all tough telling the winner of the Rumble to not come after him. Cena mocked him before referencing Rocky, and he said that Miz should have lost the title twice, but because of Michael Cole and Alex Riley, that's not the case. Cena even called them the feminine version of the Kardashians and said that Cole's got the street cred of the Jonas Brothers. What the hell? And the only challenge Miz actually had was bowel syndrome. John didn't appreciate the Miz's unheroic actions, such as walking out on a tag match last week. The champion responded calling him corny, and once again he was fed up with the whole Miz doesn't want to fight belief. And for the third or fourth time, I don't even know, the man delusionally claimed he could fight the greatest technicians. Cena, on the other hand, didn't believe Miz would even make it to WrestleMania, and the quote-unquote corny guy was frustrating him and asked if he's going to do something about it. Nothing happened because the weak version of Nexus came out. The reason why I mention this is because it served to be the catalyst for the eventual John Cena and Miz feud. Later that night, Randy Orton was once again on the receiving end of the attack, and ahead of the Rumble, Miz had a non-title match against the world champion Edge. That turned into a tag match involving Orton and Ziggler on SmackDown, and by the end of the show, it was rated RKO who stood tall. Now, with regards to the Royal Rumble, a decent match. It's not something you should go out of your way to watch once again, unless you're watching the event as a whole. It's a very basic match, but let's talk about it quickly. Similar to TLC, The Miz didn't have any offense in the beginning. It was until Alex Riley got involved and he forced the challenger to work from under. He's trying to wear him down, he's gaining confidence, and eventually he got his when Orton hit the superplex. He starts fighting back, but A-Rai puts a stop, and things were looking bleak for Randy Orton. Miz was all over him, but one clothesline didn't. The Viper was all fired up, and despite 2 moments where Miz nearly stole the match, it was Orton's to lose. Then out of everyone to appear, it was the Nexus. Ref notices this, and Riley in the ring tries to take advantage. Warren's like, I don't care for anyone, and tosses him to the outside like trash. CM Punk suddenly comes in, and GTS's Orton giving the victory to the Miz. Again, not a favorite of mine. There's some cool moments, and it's just the fact that at times it felt dull. That's what I thought about the match. I want to know what you guys think. Later that night, the Miz decided to observe the Royal Rumble. Riley had just entered, and Miz felt that it was time to come out. What I find funny about this is the fact that John Cena randomly hit him just as he enters. Like, what the hell's up with that? There was, of course, that botched elimination with Riley, but that's not the point. Riley at one point provided a distraction, leading to Miz tossing John Cena over the top rope. He randomly walked up to Cole and told him that his boy's done, but it would take a while to actually get to this storyline, the John Cena and Miz feud. Since the Miz was left without an opponent at WrestleMania 27, a Raw Rumble match was booked for the main event the next night, with the winner challenging the Miz for the title at Elimination Chamber. The King managed to unethically win it. Michael Cole's calling it a travesty, and there was finally going to be a proper conclusion to this story. The Miz was somewhat amused with the events that transpired. Why? Because he was claiming to have rooted for the King, and Miz apparently had so much respect for him. He also admitted the reason why he was rooting for him. Jerry sensed that it's because he's the oldest, but Miz said it's because he feels that they're similar. It's that element to anger people. Hell, Miz even admitted that he pandered his career after Jerry Lawler. Then he said that the King will never be champion. He responds saying that the Miz doesn't know him very well, and unlike Miz, he never patterned his career after anyone. So the Miz called him an original cheap shot artist, and then he showed a clip of the King blasting Ted DiBiase. Then Lawler said Miz sucks, as well as the fans, and they chanted it, before talking about how it's been a dream of his to compete at WrestleMania. He refused to let the opportunity slide, but Miz said that the only thing that the fans are going to hear after the match is that he's awful. Yep, the King interrupted and incited an awful chant. So he tried to strike but failed miserably, and the Apprentice didn't do much. Instead, Ted DiBiase ran down for Retribution, then Daniel Bryan follows up and the Teddy Long special is used, tag team match. The King managed to win, although the Miz wasn't involved in the finish, and the guys didn't have a final segment because Lawler's mother passed away before the show. Instead, Miz decided to take a cheap shot, saying he doesn't want to see the King use his mother's passing as an excuse after he loses. At the same time, The Rock made his return after 7 years, and I feel this is when WWE started to pick up. That's not the point. Rock said, quote unquote, if you gotta run around shooting your mouth off, telling everybody how awesome you are, it means you absolutely, undoubtedly, unquestionably, 100% completely suck. That's one thing to mention because we all know what happens afterwards. So it's time to talk about this match. I personally feel that with the individuals involved, once again, I said this earlier on, wasn't bad. So the King had some tricks up his sleeve and already caught Miz off guard. Whatever was done, the champion was a half step behind. Alex Riley tried to get involved, but the King didn't go down. Hit this very awkward superplex. Look at this. Riley was ejected. Lawler was dragging Miz into some very awkward situations. He was on the verge of losing the title. Then Cole began shouting about how Lawler shouldn't do this, and the Miz took advantage. He had enough and decided to shut up the loudmouth. The King was all over him. He even hit the fist drop, but Miz had his foot on the rope. The champ, though, snapped out of it. He's like, screw, and kicks him in the face before hitting the skull-crushing finale to retain the title. Clean victory. They did make it seem like Lawler had a chance. Small chance albeit, but still a chance. Cole randomly ran into the ring and congratulated the Miz, leaving Booker T confused. It's not a bad match at all. Fans are into it, and I prefer over the Orton matches, shockingly. Later that night, John Cena won the Raw Elimination Chamber match to punch his ticket to Atlanta. I don't think anybody expected another result. It's obvious as day, and if you were watching Raw throughout the fall of 2010 all the way up to this point, I think you read the room, because these two were somewhat kept apart for a while. Next on Raw, the WWE Champion criticized everybody for jumping up and down like little girls for The Rock. But he didn't want the fans to get it twisted, He was actually a huge fan of the Great One back in 1999. Then he heard Rock say he sucks. And Miz couldn't believe that he said that. Why? Because to him, Rock should be able to say much better stuff than that. He then said that both Cena and Rock were cultural icons that the fans love, and for good as they may be, Miz didn't care what the fans thought. And even took a page out of The Rock's book, It doesn't matter what you say. The anonymous GM, though, put a stop, and they stirred the pot by booking a tag title match, which saw the Miz team up with John Cena. Since this was the main feud heading into WrestleMania, WWE pulled the Can They Coexist card, and the duo won the titles. Immediately after the match, Wade Barrett, speaking on behalf of Gabriel and Slater, invoked their rematch clause. This time around, though, Miz cost himself and Cena the titles, and it's something that WWE loves doing. And kayfabe, though, it does make sense to me that Miz would do that, He didn't have enough humility to team up with a WrestleMania opponent. Now, even though Miz committed such a huge sin, he was still eager to get Rock's attention. The Miz even went as far as to say that Rocky's days are over and he's now the biggest star in the WWE. Hell, he even called himself the most must-see champion, and I think that was the first time he ever uttered that kind of sentence. On the topic of the tag titles, he bragged about winning the belts while Cena lost them. He wanted that to happen, and basically what I got out of this promo is that Miz didn't appreciate John Cena's lack of attention towards him. In his eyes, he's a WWE champion, and there's no reason for him not to focus. The Miz then went on to say that he will beat Cena and Rock at WrestleMania. Then the Fruity Pebble showed up, and he was fed up with the words coming from the champion's mouth and revealed that he's diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Long story short, Miz was obsessed with a bunch of things. Riley tried coming to the save, and even Michael Cole was unimpressed. He made fun of his delivery of the promo, and then Cena changed the subject and asked if Miz wants his legacy to be shared with another man. He saw this as Cena potentially fearing Alex Riley, and Miz low-key dissed him, saying that unlike John, he's mentoring the young generation and he ain't scared of losing his position. Cena then challenged Riley to a match, with the stipulation being, if he wins, Riley's gone. Miz accepted under one condition, though. What was that? Well, Mr. Ego wanted John to admit that he's the greatest wrestler if he loses. This was nothing to Cena, he'd been made fun of, been called all kinds of things such as Barney's turd. The anonymous GM pops up and it's revealed that the match is a steel cage. There was no pinfall submission, you had to escape. About this one, Miz lied, he's claiming, I won't interfere. And since this was Purple Cena, Miz's interference meant nothing. He did attack after the match, and I don't seem to remember Cena winning this one. Mandel once again got me. Miz was all happy here, but it certainly didn't show the following week because he didn't show up. Instead, he was out to protest because of the lack of recognition. Turns out he was lying, knowing full well that John Cena's attention was on The Rock. He decided to attack him at the end of the night. Miz told Cena that he's disrespected him for the last time, and he mentioned how every time Cena's involved with The Rock, this happens. He then did a little rhyme saying, quote-unquote, The Rock, John Cena, Macho Man, and Liz, Stone Cold, and Bret Hart, there's nothing compared to The Miz. Then he introduced himself to The Rock, saying that he's the WWE champion and the star of WrestleMania. He downplayed Rock's appearance and told him to know his role and be the best Ryan Seacrest he can be, and if they cross paths on Raw, Miz promised to take his 4 and 5 catchphrases, his sunglasses, all kinds of things, and stick it straight up his candy ass. Cena was slowly recovering, so he hits the skull-crushing finale on him before wrapping up the promo. Then he added insult to injury by hitting the people's elbow, and with regards to this whole thing, I love it. I thought it was pretty damn good. Miz for weeks told Cena to not underestimate him or lose focus on him, but he paid the price, and Miz forcefully inserted himself into the whole Rock and Cena thing. For a second there, he kind of felt like a threat. When The Rock responded, well, you know what's up. He felt that Miz wanted a huge ass whooping and promised to be on Raw before WrestleMania. Miz didn't feel very remorseless over last week and was in a very joyous mood. He roasted Rock, mentioning the Tooth Fairy, calling him a has-been, and downplayed his father and grandfather's success, citing the lack of the WWE Championship in their resume. He also took offense to The Rock saying he owns John Cena, feeling that he, Miz, owns Cena instead. Best of all, he promised Rock that he will be overshadowed when he brings it. But this promo was nothing compared to the end of the night. This, to me, it was one of the most memorable moments to come from this title reign. So John Cena is busy getting his ass beat by Del Rio and Brodus Clay. All of a sudden, The Rock's music plays. Fans go crazy, and it seemed like it was truly him, and they actually believed it, but it turns out Miz thought it was October 31st. He had an insult to injury by hitting a rock bottom on Cena. Cole was insufferable, just a plain irritating man. Miz told Cena that he's gotten to him on the road to WrestleMania before suplexing him on the ramp. Best of all, he DDT'd him before hitting a skull-crushing finale below the WWE logo. Because of this, John Cena finally got serious. It had been a long time coming, and he admitted that this ongoing thing with The Rock was distracting him from The Miz. And an unexpected turn of events, him being sidelined at home, is proof that Miz deserves to be WWE Champion. This is what John Cena was saying. At the same time, the Awesome One was promising to change Miz-tery that night. John Cena apparently wasn't there to witness this in person. With that said, Alex Riley returned. He claimed that he was rehired, but as the vice president of something, I believe corporate communications or something along the lines of that. Miz was controversially comparing this moment to, say, a Michael Jordan or a Muhammad Ali match, and he flexed his success for all to hear. Yada yada yada, but let's skip a little. He said that he's more charismatic than HBK, more physically dominant than Andre the Giant, smarter than Rock and Cena, and in a nutshell, The Miz believed that he was the greatest WWE champion of all time. He even went as far as to say that he's flipped the WWE, and thus The Miz started flipping everything. The mic and of course, the title itself. This garnered some heat, which is a positive for The Miz, and with the altering of the title, it represented the true nature of the belt. According to Miz, it was now the most prestigious, most coveted title in the world, and he even went as far as to say that he won't have many title reigns because he ain't losing it. John Cena popped up via satellite and praised what had went down. Then he told Miz to never make him angry. He began shouting, and it was revealed that he was actually home. Home being in the WWE, and it was time to take out the trash. Cena's music plays, he takes a jab at Rock saying he's now live via satellite, and those two learned what Purple John Cena was actually capable of. You see, this is the same man who took a DDT on the concrete floor. You seriously think he was scared of these two? Poor Alex Riley took most of the beating though, and Miz ran away. On the final Raw before WrestleMania, The Rock was a man of his word. He actually showed up. This led to an epic confrontation between himself and John Cena. Those two were putting on a promo clinic, and then The Miz showed up. He called both men overhyped and overrated. Miz didn't care about last week because he had owned Cena for a couple of weeks now. Nonetheless, he actually praised Cena because he knew that there was going to be a fight Sunday. The Rock, though, he ain't doing nothing tonight because it would ruin his image. He mocked him before threatening to beat him up, and The Miz was really pushing his buttons. Rock said that it doesn't matter what the champ thinks before Riley struck. They jumped him, but Rock had that part-timer Attribution. He hit the people's elbow on him before walking directly into the Attitude Adjustment. The crowd, the Chicago crowd, was loudly booing Cena and heading into the event. I don't think many believed Miz had a chance. The hype surrounding WrestleMania 27 was ridiculous at the time. WWE was really trying to deliver with all these big names appearing. That's another story, but on the topic of John Cena versus The Miz, it was bad. No sugarcoating it, oh, but it was decent, none of that. For WrestleMania main event, it's one of the worst you'll ever watch. Let's talk about it and explain why. So The Miz entered the ring first. A lot of people complained about this. They're like, oh, The Miz is the champion, he should be entering last. He had one of the greatest promos you'll ever see beforehand, and I just adore this promo unlike many others. The fact that they got announced as Hate Me Now truly enhances this promo and elevates it to a level that not many can match. The song truly captured the essence of what Miz's character was at the time. He started caring less about what the fans thought. It was going to be him and they could hate on him. It's as simple as that. His entrance featured a bunch of inflatable letters spelling awesome. It's a bit tacky. And knowing the context here, this man was on cloud 9. This man had been dreaming of this moment for his entire life, and there he stood in Atlanta on the main event of WrestleMania. Insane how things could be. John Cena, on the other hand, had a church choir introducing him. Not only that, but DMX's Prayer 3 played along with a video package of his career, and WrestleMania 27 also marked the birth of Red John Cena. Also, with DMX and Nas being played, you'd think WrestleMania was in New York. Now, in my opinion, the reason why people disliked this WrestleMania was the whole Michael Cole thing and the main event. I personally believe that if this match was just good, not out of this world, but people would look at this WrestleMania a bit positively. Alright, the action was pretty basic early on. The crowd didn't seem much interested in the action itself because it was pretty dull. Miz took control, slowly taking his time to execute moves. They started waking up when Cena began his comeback. The match was starting to get intense, back and forth action. Cena bumped into the exposed turnbuckle and took the skull-crushing finale, yet kicked out. Then the ref got knocked down and Cena hit the AA, and Riley for the second time gets involved. Once again, John kicked out. This is when the fans started getting into the match. There was drama all over the place. Miz accidentally blasted Alex Riley with the briefcase, walked into an AA, yet kicked out, and best, or in this case, worst of all, they brawled on the outside, and Miz's head, ouch, bumped onto the concrete floor, damn. Because of the clothesline, both men failed to answer the 10 count, ending the match on a double count. However, The Rock didn't seem very fond of the match result, and seeing as he's, quoting The Miz, the rhyme secrets of WrestleMania, he came out. The anonymous GM once again popped up and The Rock shouted at the damn computer that it doesn't matter what you think before starting the title match. Alright, it's back on. Cena's looking at AA Miz, but he fails and instead takes the Rock bottom. Miz goes to the cover. 1, 2, 3. Who could have predicted that? The poor guy didn't even remember what occurred, and once again, I'll get into that later. Just because Miz was celebrating, it didn't mean The Rock was happy. He ended up walking down into the ring, laid the smacking down, and hit the people's elbow once more. So looking at this match and story, The Miz was in the background. It was almost never about him, which is sad because he's the WWE champion in the main event of WrestleMania. The main focus was on John Cena and The Rock, and that's not any disrespect to The Miz. Anybody in the full-time roster is going to be overlooked in that position. It doesn't matter if it's Del Rio or CM Punk. WWE is also going to place that individual as the third wheel, whoever it was on the roster, unless it was somebody like Triple H or Stone Cold. Like, that's this far out. Of course, they wouldn't be overlooked because they're part-timers. Now, did Miz deserve that spot? In my opinion, I don't know if this is a hot take, yes. He worked so damn hard throughout the year, and to me was the best heel at the time. Other than that, Del Rio wasn't ready for a spot like that, and CM Punk had only just returned and was leading that dull-ass Nexus side that nobody took seriously. I think if that had worked out well, then it's a different story. Miz wasn't lighting the world on fire with his in-ring performances, but on the mic and everything else, that's something else. With regards to the match, I didn't like it. Like, for a WrestleMania match, it sure felt extremely dull and forgettable, and nobody's gonna be like, hey, I should watch this match again. Hell no. I barely got through it on my rewatch of WrestleMania 27 3 years ago. About The Miz in the main event, after that whole concrete spot, he doesn't remember much from the match itself, which is sad to think about. Also, I feel that Jim Ross described this match best saying, quote unquote, I don't really know because Vince made that decision, and for me, to think as Vince does would be scary. I would say it was a good feeling that Vince had developed to have enough confidence that Miz could carry his share of the water as the WWE champion. Also, it's an interesting way to get through that WrestleMania. When people left that show, were they thinking about Miz retaining the title, or were they looking forward to Rock and Cena? We both know the answer to that. He facilitated, he was a role player on that night even as a champion. I think Vince felt it served a lot of masters at that point in time. That's how I would look at it. Yeah, I agree with that. I think Miz knew his role, pun intended, and was cool with it. What I find funny about this whole thing was the fact that WrestleMania 27 was technically sacrificed for 28. Alright, we're done with WrestleMania 27. It's off to the next night on Raw. So, the next night, they kind of teased an Austin Miz match, which looking back on is absolutely insane. If I remember correctly, Stone Cold felt very good about himself at the time and was doing a lot more than just hitting stunners. Anyways, it was Austin Miz's next title defense. Extreme Rules. May 1st was the date. A gauntlet match was booked for the April 11th episode of Raw, with the winner challenging for the gold. R-Truth and John Cena made it to the very end, and Cena had things figured out, but The Miz preferred to attack the competition. He then grabbed the mic, called both men losers, and was joyous over the result that he caused. Then an email from the anonymous Raw GM turned that smile upside down. They did agree that there's no number one contender. Instead, there's two, and it was revealed that Miz has got to defend the title in a triple threat match. Immediately afterwards, Cena and Truth retaliated and sent the heels running. Then tensions arose between them to end the show. It was cool that R-Truth was finally going to get a proper title match. If I remember correctly, he had never challenged for the WWE Championship up to this point. Sure, there was an Elimination Chamber match, but this was much different. It was all good. Wait a minute. John Morrison was now the number one contender. I don't know why they did this. I couldn't find much. But R-Truth ended up smoking a cigarette, turning heel, and that's an image I'll never forget. The Miz, meanwhile, was whining. He was talking about how this greatly affected him, and he was even angry about the steel cage stipulation. So The Miz sat down in the middle of the ring to protest the match. Nothing came out of this other than a tag team match. There wasn't much of a build for the Extreme Rules match itself. Of course, we gotta mention the fact that Cena was drafted to SmackDown and back to Raw, and the damn bastards really got me, and I've yet to experience disappointment similar to that. Oh, and Cena nailed Alex Riley so hard that I felt it. As I said, there wasn't much there. Morrison was just an additional wrestler on paper to make it seem interesting. That's on paper, though, because we all know what he did later on. For the match, John Cena was talking about how he hasn't been champion in 10 months, talking about how he had been through a lot, but at the end of the night, the champ is here. Alex Riley, mmeanwhile, was literally destroying Miz's confidence, and this greatly offended him. Riley had to tell him everything he wanted to hear, and he's like, don't you ever say something like that again. So let's talk about it. Miz at this point had the title for 159 days. He tried to escape in the beginning, but those two did some work on him. Morrison was pacey and explosive. Miz was more on the methodical side. Cena was powerful and had a much more devastating offense compared to the others. Hit this face buster from the top. Morrison, on the other hand, he was much more colorful. He was a show stealer, and the stuff he was doing was extraordinary. Anyways, Miz took this terrible look at superplex. It was extremely ugly, as you can see here. He was struggling, but at a moment's notice caught Johnny Boy. He almost escaped the cage, but Cena caught him and tried to escape himself. Neither did, and from there we had some very intriguing moments where it was anybody's match. Morrison, though, he really made some believe. Small chance, albeit, but still. The man even found himself some time to hit a super Starship Pain, but R-Truth interfered and cost him the match. He also leveled John Cena as well. With the attack, The Miz had an opportunity to retain the gold, but John Cena refused to let it end this way. He willed himself to the top and grabbed Miz in order to hit the Avalanche AA. 1, 2, 3, new champion. John Cena then announced some very unexpected news after the show, and the match itself was good. It's not out of this world or anything like that, but the addition of John Morrison really spiced things up. It's not a favorite of mine from next title reign. That would be the Falls Count Anywhere match, but it's up there. It's up there with some of the best matches from Miz's title run. So that does it. Miz held the title for 159 days, and in my eyes, he wasn't treated as a big deal. That's a problem a lot of the WWE title reigns had during that part of the decade. Like, if a heel held the title, it's like, oh, it's only a matter of time before he lost it. There were some moments there where he looked like a big deal. You know, when he called out The Miz and introduced himself, I thought that was awesome. No pun intended. I thought it was cool to see him look like a big deal for a moment, but they went nowhere with that because it was obviously about John Cena and The Rock, not The Miz himself. And basically, the title run itself, I wouldn't say it's the worst title reign. It's not the worst, because there were some positives from this run. Negative, the booking once again. Miz wasn't treated like a big deal at times. Positives, character work, mic work, excellent. Alright, I want to know what you guys think. My match of the video is, of course, John Morrison versus The Miz. Falls Count Anywhere. My favorite segment was when The Miz nailed John Cena with the title and introduced himself to The Rock. I want to know what's yours. That's your first video. Make sure you hit the reality check on the like button and perhaps the skull-crushing finale and the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.